right, so this is what we get for talk title when we have to submit it 4 or 5 months in advance. Actually, just the first thing to reiterate what Jer said, that this is actually really, really fun to kind of have all of these people in the same room and in the same space. I was doing some talk prep last night at the hotel and sort of watching all these machines kind of popping up on the side, and it's like, oh, hey, Amanda Cox is here working, you know, and she's working on her slides and all that. Isn't that cool? Like, Amanda Cox is my hero. And then it's like, oh, wait, but here's Dan Schiffman and Jonathan Harris, and I suspect Felton MBA is probably Nick Felton's MacBook Air, and so it's kind of this funny, like, they're out there. But just really a great, you know, like, thanks so much to Dave and all the organizers for actually putting something like this together. It's really quite fun. So I'm going to talk about three general topics, and within each of those, I have a pair of projects to talk about. In general, the work that I'm showing, I haven't actually for all of it, I haven't shown it in this setting, so it may also break, and I actually have like Eclipse open, and just in case something really blows up. But we'll see what happens. Sort of a different kind of luck from what we heard in the last talk. So first thing, design. I've always been very interested in design, was interested in design and programming as very separate things for a really long time. And one of the things I really love about design is basically it's this excuse to just work on whatever you are curious about at any particular time. Like you wake up one morning and you have some idea about some random thing, and you can go and do a project about that, and it is work, which is really kind of cool. And so a lot of the projects that I've done reflect that essentially. So an example of this, a long time ago, so 2005, I did this very short piece that was about baseball salaries. So the Red Sox had won the World Series the previous year, in 2004, and oh, this is very exciting that they finally won their first World Series in 84 years. And the thing is, like, it wasn't actually that much of a achievement in a sense, because they had the second highest payroll in all of baseball, and like really kind of clobbering all these other small market teams. And I'd also read the book Moneyball recently, and I thought this was kind of interesting. So what does this look like across different teams? So I put together this fairly simple piece. We've got the list of teams on the left-hand side and their wins versus losses listed. On the right-hand side, we have the actual salaries of those teams. And so if you have a steep blue line that your team is doing well, or your general manager is doing a good job of hiring people, and then if you have a steep red line, you're kind of throwing money away. And this updates over time. It turns out computers got faster since 2005, so this runs very quickly. It's a little over-caffeinated, but this is the general idea. And so the thing about this was I actually did this as this sort of short sketch project. So it was one Saturday evening. I was watching way too much baseball that year, and so wanted to turn it into work. And so during the evening there was a 7 o'clock game, and so I sat there and worked in this project for a bit. And this is actually my schedule from that day, with some names blurred out to protect the innocent, and also how much I actually swam to protect my ego. But it really, in spite of it being this short initial sketch, and there was like an afternoon or two of doing the automatic updating of the data and things like that. But by and large, it came from that thing, that evening, and it really kind of got away a little bit after that. And so a few months later, I was doing a visualization book, and so I had to rewrite it. I used the project as one of the examples, and had to rewrite the whole thing to actually make it legible for actual humans, and explain what it was that I was doing. And so that rewrite took far longer than that initial thing had ever taken. And then folks like Jason Kotke were kind enough to year over year occasionally link to it. So in 2008, get this post that the chart was updated, and so that's kind of fun. So people were actually kind of watching it, and I would get these emails in April and May, and people asking to update the piece. And it's like, we're back at this sketch that was just a little couple hours kind of thing. It got picked up by the Freakonomics guys, who were looking at thinking about salary cap, and so they talk about, so this chart comparing team performance with total player salaries over the 2008 season by data visualization guru Ben Fry does seem to suggest a link between higher pay and sluggish performance. And so so that's kind of, it's not quite the intent of the piece, but interesting that they had linked to it. But this also is the source of my favorite comment about work that I've ever received. So usually like I don't read comments. Usually like they're way too positive or way too negative. But I love this. It's like I wanted, this guy needs a hug, But and also in reading this, it's like, no, my friend, you need a PhD in useless plots from superficial analysis school. And so, and also like it's this couple-hour sketch, and so now it's kind of, out there living, and so it has to be perfect and whatever. It's also been interesting, sort of in other contexts, that in doing client projects or like sort of presenting to people who are potential clients, we sat with some finance folks and going through some fairly complicated work that I'd done in the past, looking at genetic data and doing all this analysis and things like that, and they're kind of like going through this half-hour talk and on and on and on, and finally they're just kind of looking at me like, hey, we don't do genetics. This isn't and on a whim showed them this salary thing, and they're like, that's it. That's what we need. That's finance. That's it. It's like, what? That it's this little chart that kind of moves around, and that's kind of odd. But or Marius Watts said, so I kind of hate baseball, I think was what he said. So I kind of hate baseball, but I actually kind of get something about what's happening here. So it's kind of interesting. But this year I wanted to kind of just make a version that kind of killed the others so I could put this thing to bed. Rewrote something to actually do some Python stuff to actually pull all the data for several years, have it update over time, things like that. And then built this final, a more final version. So here's the 2011 numbers. One of the typical problems with this is that because we're just sort of ranking things directly like this, it's not really in proportion to what's happening. So if we switch over to using proportions, just doing some things with the design to actually have the typefaces and spacing and sizing and all that actually adjust, so that everything fits properly. And this actually gives you a much nicer, picture overall. Or if I want to see more directly kind of what's actually happening with a particular team, we can do that. Or just switching through different years. So here's 2011, 2010, 2009, going back into 98, these heady days where the largest baseball, or the largest team salary was $70 million, and the smallest was $9.2 million. Fast forward to, present day, it's 198 million and down to 55 million. So a bit astonishing. But the, here just kind of trying to have a handful of different ways of actually looking at the numbers and sort of working with the data kind of as a nice fluid, sort of material. That here we're getting a whole lot of jumble, so we can instead actually just split the graphs out. So this is the two different leagues, the American League and the National League, that group the different teams, and this also gives us a little bit extra room per line for each of these different teams. And so, and then if they go back, you see them kind of rearranging and getting back together again. So really trying to work out, so a lot of times for these sort of small sketches like this, it's a matter of figuring out other ideas that will fit into, a later project and kind of be able to refine the hell out of some aspect of the design and interaction. So next one is about pi. So pi is this really wonderful and amazing number. I got interested in this. There's this piece I've been wanting to make basically every Pi day, so March 14th of every year. Unfortunately, that's like the worst time of year consistently for clients and other deadlines and obligations and things. But it's this thing that there's a probability. So given 100 million digits of pi, you have a 100% chance of finding any 5-digit number in that sequence. So you can just look up any old number, and it will show up at least one position somewhere in that entire sequence of 100 million digits. And so, up to 6 digits, it's almost 100%, and then it falls down a bit toward, 8 digits, 63%, 9 digits, 10 digits, 11 digits. And so it's kind of fascinating, right? That it's a little reminds me a little bit of Borges and the Library of Babel story, where basically, it contains every single book ever written. So the pi kind of contains all of these numbers. And so what does this actually look like? And I was actually going to go through the math of how you calculate out this sort of probability of how to find a certain number of digits. I will spare you that instead. I'll save it for another talk. But essentially the idea is that for any of the digits, it's you have a 1 in 10 chance of finding a digit at that particular point. For 2 digits, it's 1 in 10 times 1 in 10, and so on. And then it gets a little more complicated because it can be anywhere in the sequence and all that. But the piece itself tries to get across just being able to do that search, and that there are folks who've done pi searching things up on the web. That equation comes from one of the folks who actually runs a site about this. But this is a mobile app soon to be posted, and so I can just tap out digits and actually find them in this pi sequence. And so you can look up your phone number, favorite numbers, etc. Let's see, 8, 6, 7, 5. So here we are at the 9.2 millionth digit of pi, and we actually have this sequence. And so it's one of these amazing things about just sort of the way that math works, the way that numbers work, just really quite fascinating. And how can we actually start conveying some of that and actually be able to demonstrate it and see it in something as simple as a very basic mobile app like that. So thing 2 is clients. And so as Jerry mentioned, I run a company called Fathom. We've been going since about 2010. And at Fathom, we're doing all data visualization work. So basically trying to put this stuff into practice. And we've done a number of projects for GE. They've been a terrific partner. And one thing that we actually proposed to them was something about their annual reports. So basically, here's GE's very first annual report, going all the way back to January 31st of 1893. And the idea was to first start with, can we actually, that's an incredible cross-section of history, right? So going, it's, speaking of math, it's about 120 years, right? So to be able to actually see trends in word usage and stuff like that was the initial thing. And so for that, I first built a more straightforward sketch to basically say, let me search for any word in all of the reports. And so at the bottom, this is the reports in the 1800s, going up through present day. The width are the actual pages, so the number of individual pages going upwards, and then kind of doing this arc thing so that we didn't have, because just to make a better shape out of it in general. And so as I type in different words, let's see, transistor shows up in the mid-50s, kind of along with technology. Health, they really get into in like the last 10, 15 years. So we did this as a kind of the prototype to just see what's actually in there. Will this data set actually work? Used very rough versions of the reports themselves that we found from an online library. So this is just be able to roll over particular pages and have it bring the page itself up. And so that was the first sketch, just to get the idea across and see if it was worth pursuing. Katie, one of the designers who worked with us, kind of hated this visual, and there was something kind of gnawing at her that just like, it looks like something, it looks like something. She's also a resident Texan, and so she finally, like one day, she's like, oh, I figured it out. It's it looks like the Longhorns, and so she quickly set about trying to fix that. And so this was an interim version of the design, and then the final looks like this. So overall, we've got the 1800s on the left-hand side, up through actually 2011 on the right-hand side. Vertically, this is now the number of spreads instead of individual pages. If you look here, you can see how the things kind of contracted through the Depression and the war years, expanded out a bit. Printing got cheap later in the 80s, and then things got all the disclosure rules happening here, where things kind of ballooned to having that where you were required to have a lot more sort of back material about financial data and things like that. But this version simply highlights particular words, so we can check out individual words, or do an actual selection and look at a particular page. So one of the reasons that we were interested about the reports themselves was this thing of, their annual reports in general, as sort of a corporate America thing, are a really fascinating reflection of kind of what's happening within graphic design at the time, and sort of stylistically what's happening. So even just looking at things like the covers. So here's 1954, 53. Just the style of the design, topography used, the way that the imagery is used, colors, and so on. Like that part's just kind of fascinating as a design geek sort of perspective. And then it's also this incredible reflection of what's happening, within the U.S. in particular. So, unfortunately, that was we skipped over one. But the back in 1945, there's a paragraph where they're talking about the bomb and working on war effort. This is a page in the 70s that's talking about the energy crisis and how that's affecting what's actually happening within the business. Or you see something like technology. So technology is a term that shows up in late 50s, more so in the early 60s, and innovation kind of follows along with that. And so technology really kind of came along with this the transition to digital, or the sort of introduction of digital and the transistor and so on. And then for a particular word use, that each of these things that are highlighted, it'll bring up a little blurb of text. And so basically, here they're talking about their first transistor radio. And so they're talking about, hey, we've sold 1,000,000 transistor radios of this popular post-war innovation. Also words like, so international is kind of spread throughout, that they'd always had sort of an international arm. But the term global is actually kind of a late 80s, early 90s, I don't know if it's a trend in business or really just the time at which American businesses were really starting to move or expand operations overseas, where you start seeing a lot more of that happening, or a lot more mentions of global later. Something like a word like economy. So, when things show up that a word might be used different ways, one of the wonderful ambiguities of the English language. So economy in these older pages talk about, improve, so several novel types of arc lamps have greatly improved economy if perfected and placed in the market. So talking about economy of, simplification, business process, manufacturing process, and so on. Economy of administration, sort of simplifying how their facilities were run. And it's not until the mid-40s where they actually start talking about the national economy, and that's something that's part of the public conscious, presumably, and that it being discussed a little bit more. Also, though, like just as we were digging through that we had to look at, so this is 5,500 pages of reports in general. There's also some sort of interesting things that we ran across. So here's this cute cat pawing at the very first 27-inch CRT picture tube, or just picture tube, essentially. Which is kind of, and so here we are sort of designing this thing out on a, 27-inch display, and this is, here we are in 1952, this very basic version of it, and a cat to show it off for us. This was another favorite. This is the Partio cart on the upper right-hand side. Talking about sort of an example of, so products for electrical living outdoors, typify General Electric's effort to supply the public's changing tastes. Colorful outdoor lighting sets the scene for teenagers' fun with a portable stereophonic record player, while grown-ups enjoy a Partio cart, a complete outdoor cooking center on wheels. Useful small appliances such as the electric coffee maker complete the picture. So sort of awkward 50s, or I guess 60s scenery. Or these guys like putting their Eyeo presentation together over on the right-hand side. Also, they had these Jack Welch years where Jack Welch was this really sort of boisterous CEO, and he'd write these letters and say things like, layers insulate, they slow things down, they garble. Leaders in highly layered organizations are like people who wear several sweaters outside on a freezing winter day. They remain warm and comfortable but are blissfully ignorant of the realities of their environment. They couldn't be further from what's going on. It's like, oh, wow, it's incredible. And presumably that's what those guys are talking about there. Appliances has long been, one of the things that they look at. We actually ran across this in 1967, where General Electric and Hot Point appliances are being offered in a new color, Harvest, supplementing the fashionable avocado and copper tone colors, which are marketed in addition to white. So, many of you probably grew up with appliances that were this wonderful Harvest Gold color. Also, just the role of how genders actually changed throughout the years. So, initially, early 60s, it was only women in the kitchen. The only place where you would see women in the report was actually in the kitchen. Thankfully, fast forward to 1976, and a guy is getting his own damn cup of coffee and pouring it for himself. Let's see here. Yeah, here another, so here's Nixon and Khrushchev visiting this GE Kitchen of the Future. It's not really said how the Harvest Gold color may have contributed to the Cold War. And also that, going off of the gender roles that, so here's what the management team looked like in 1976. This is what the management team looked like in, I believe this is 2005. So just a much, totally different sort of mix. And this is when, where is she? Down at the bottom there, Gertrude Michelson is actually retiring, and this is when she started. So there's Gertrude up in the upper right-hand corner. And so as we were going through these, we were kind of like rooting for Gertrude the whole way through, like kind of like, what's gonna happen? Yeah, and so that's the extent of that. So really just a fun piece as far as putting together the these different sort of stories that are embedded in there. It was kind of a process nightmare. So 120 years, so 120 different reports, as I mentioned, 5,500 actual pages that all had to be scanned. A lot of that was serviced out, although even a third of that, once that had come through, still needed additional work. And so Katie did some initial just pictures of different ways of grouping things together. This is roughly by decades that these different styles of the reports. And then a lot of post-processing that had to happen. So this one doesn't look too bad, but it's actually, it's tilted a couple degrees. And this was fairly common. Sometimes there's cropping that needs to be done, or cropping and tilting. And so we built a piece of software to actually take care of doing the rotations. So at the left-hand side, we have a grid on top of the page itself, and then on the right-hand side, essentially 8 different edges that tell you the most about, sort of what's actually happening with orientation. So after fixing that, it looks something like this. So basically, how can we actually automate our process to make this stuff happen quickly? So we, and what had happened was basically, we were kind of, moving along with the project. We had a prototype version, not with final images, and we essentially got word that we needed to finish the whole project, to have a generally available version in 2 weeks. And so I spent one afternoon building this tool so that we could have a handful of people all cropping. We used Dropbox to actually sync these thousands of images back and forth between different machines so that people could jump on and start and work on cropping and just kind of continue with the process. And then on the text side, there's some really wonderful open source tools that are available, the PDF to text and Tesseract and some others that take care of OCR and things like that. But OCR, so the converting the images into actual text, is itself a fairly complicated sort of beast. And so this was the next tool that I built was to say, all right, given a page of text, let's make it easy to kind of go word by word and do the repairs on the text itself. That was taking way too long. And so instead what we did was went with the excerpts that you see show up in the application to make sure that they all made sense. So basically, the second version of this tool just highlights a particular word, and then over the right-hand side, you get the actual text, and you can make modifications to that to make sure that it is making sense, because some look like this. So it's product areas as innovations prove popular lamps in the 85th year. It's these strange sort of incantations sounding things, and then at the end it's that you have to clean up along the way. And then in the end, so we finished that out. It's up on the GE visualization site. It's a JavaScript HTML5 app. Chris took the Java and processing-based version that we had and ported it over to JavaScript in a sort of Herculean effort in a couple weeks. And we're hoping to return to it. We'll do some, that the original version was going to be a tablet-based thing. So this was from the sketches for that Katie had put together, where basically be able to scan by years, because again, the covers are just so fun. Or just by images, so grouping things together based on different types of themes. And also just there's so much, these images are just fantastic. So it's in the, what are we, late 50s, early 60s? I mean, is this the young George Bush, or just that everybody looked like that back then? This is why you grew up thinking computers were uncool. Somewhere Tufty is really angry and dying. So wonderful. And also just these, rework, absenteeism, spoilage, and these are being plotted, and we're gonna get this all sorted out. And so I think there's a lot of other, sort of gems embedded elsewhere within these things. Another client project, so the other thing under the client realm, Consumers Union is this organization. They've done consumer reports since 1936. This is the very first. And they were basically this consumer advocacy group, going back to 36 when they rated Best Buys in toilet soaps. And so they've run this magazine for the longest time. So as a young data geek, my parents got this magazine. They would have these charts, and it's oh, this is amazing. There's all this data. And so this was kind of a dream project as far as, hey, like, they gave us the chance to kind of try and rework how some of that, how some of this rating stuff actually was done, and that in particular they'd made the move to the web, obviously, from print, but the web was essentially a direct translation of, or a near direct translation of what was actually happening in the magazine. And so, as you all know, that that has problems that come with it. And so this is what the site looks like at this point. And what they wound up hiring us to do is basically work on a tablet application that looked at cars data. So ratings for cars are just this kind of messy and complicated thing that just a pile of numbers, and how do you actually help people make a decision with it. We went the route of creating a tablet application for it so that we could do something that was a bit disconnected from the web, so that it didn't necessarily have to fit what was happening design-wise in the web, but also could maybe provide some guidance on directions that they might go with the design. And so they were using us as kind of an external resource for that. So one of the fairly early things Katie looked at was just, given this ratings table, what are different ways of showing it? So one of the problems, in a sense, for what they've done here, or what they've done over the years, is that red is good. And so if you've done the data visualization, there's sort of a first or second day thing that, red is generally a negative thing, or is at least a bit fraught. So instead, red is good and black is bad. So that's kind of that's one of the first things that, do we break that up? Do we, how sacred is that? And I think that folks within the company are probably pretty much evenly split, perhaps, about, yes, we absolutely need to get rid of it, and no, we can't possibly do that. That's our entire brand identity. So a couple of variations that Katie put together based on different ways of showing that data. We also did a couple sketches. So Mark put this together that basically just took all of the cars and did acceleration and braking on all of the vehicles. So basically, sporty cars are fast at acceleration, and then how quickly they can actually perform and brake and all that. And so all of that was eventually, we did some other research about sort of how their site was put together. So the pages that I showed you before, one of the problems is just how many links exist between all the different sections of the site. And so we wanted a very clear way of getting from one point to another, and also really kind of reducing the overall sort of page count to it. And so, middle is content, the top is filters for the thing you're looking for, and the bottom is the saved cars. And so this is the thing that we built. Essentially, it's a working prototype. So uses real data, runs in JavaScript, built for tablets, and you can do different queries and actually search through the information. You get the results dynamically updating and so on. You can scroll through different connections and things, but really just trying to have a very flat hierarchy to how everything, that most things are one, maybe two taps away as far as all the information that you can get to, so that you can get a better sense of just how to get around all of this. And then also they really wanted us to say, what are different ways that we can actually look at the different numbers that we show to people. So this is cost of ownership, which is a complex thing because it happens over year over year, and also has these different sub numbers that all contribute to the overall cost, and those change year over year. And so how can we do that? This is our final take on the red versus black dots. So basically showing the positives or the negatives, that by using a little bit of interaction, we can actually toggle between things. Sometimes we actually just return to the dots themselves. And here, so doing some comparisons. Another thing that we looked at was this idea of a sort of field guide. So basically they do all this research, but in order to explain it, I'll jump to this guy here. So if you look at something like miles per gallon ratings, you can explain that in text, and it's fairly complicated to get through that explanation and how it works. So if your MPG changes by 4 on a car and you drive this many miles a year, what does that actually mean? And so instead, with a very simple touch interface, we can swipe back and forth and just actually interactively see what that looks like. So fun project. All right, so I'll close with thing number 3, which is just some small experiment projects. So basically, this is for the folks who are working at Fathom. One of the things that we want to keep doing is just having different things that they're curious about and having them pursue those projects and sort of try and represent data in different ways. And so Mark began on this thing looking at hardiness zones. So plants are basically rated based on a hardiness, which is essentially what sort of temperature, the minimum temperature a plant can take before dying. And so the US is then broken up, in the world, broken up into different zones based on what plants can actually make it there. And so the last version of this chart had actually been published in 1990. And so Mark wanted to create an updated version. And so to do that, he went to NOAA and found this, their amazing just pile of weather data. So 13,000 weather stations all over the world, many of them going all the way back to 1930. And so it's this really wonderful data set of temperature and wind and precipitation and things like that. And so as a first thing, he built a interactive viewer for that. So here's all these several thousand weather stations around the world. We're looking at the 2010 data, and then plotted down at the bottom, that's the temperature in that particular zone. And so kind of fun to basically just take this massive amount of information and work with it in a fairly simple interactive setting. So zoom in a little bit here. And to return to the zones, it's, here the highlighting zone by zone, what it looks like across the world. Or if I want to actually just look at temperature, this is world temperature day by day going around the world. And so it's this amazing, you can just kind of see these weather patterns sort of floating around as you move day to day across the chart. So he put together that as the sketch, and then the like so many things you'll see this week. Then took the US data and did a Voronoi diagram for it, and then turned that into a blog post that used the location system stuff in HTML5 to basically be able to have people look up themselves on that actual map. And so just really, really simple interface that you just click try it there. And so this is sort of an ongoing project. We'll see where it goes. Sadly, he had to put it down as sort of working through some other projects instead. And in the meantime, 20 years later, USDA actually got around to releasing a new map, which instead uses 10 times as much data. Mark was a little pissed. But sort of we'll see where that, the sort of global weather going back many years thing actually winds up. All right, and our last story is about a bar. So there's this bar in Cambridge called Bukowski. Bukowski's is named for noted dead author Bukowski, and also noted alcoholic author. And so Bukowski's has this club where basically it's the Dead Authors Club, and you can, if you drink all 134, I believe it is, beers on their menu, not all at once, but you have 180 days to do it, and if you drink all of these beers, you get to pick a dead author's name. That goes in a mug, and that is now your mug for drinking at Bukowski's. And so luckily at Fathom, we have just the person for the job. So Chris I get this email from Chris, and he's like, I'm going to do this Bukowski's Dead Authors thing. I think it'd be kind of an interesting project because, there's all these different beers, and it's, really kind of interesting data, and that there's the whole time aspect to it, and, how we're putting all that together. And he said, yeah, I think this will be kind of interesting, and it's kind of like a Nick Felton plus Norm from Cheers. And so naturally, absolutely. And so Chris began collecting, so he set off to do this with, luckily with a friend, and began keeping copious notes. So this is one page of his calendar. So here on the 24th, having some Chimay, Genesee cream ale. The bastards didn't count one over the, the Lone Star, so we actually had to go back and drink Lone Star again. And so, doing proper Nick Felton style data collection, while also the Norm from Cheers liver work. And then this is the most recent, first version of the piece that he's now put together is an infographic, basically putting all of this together into one place. And so, as I mentioned, it's you have 180 days to finish. He did it in 64. So here at the left-hand side, we have the calendar. The grays mark the drinking days, so days spent drinking 42. Beers consumed 134. A plot of drinking session productivity down at the bottom with a nightly beer average of 3.2. Chris's mother was concerned about him. And then here plotting out the calendar, this is the daily regimen, so each of the beers numbered, the overall volume being the total amount consumed, the darkness being the alcohol content of that particular beer. The numbers themselves being from this bottom section here, the list of 134 beers. There are some truly awful things, he tells us, like things that taste like strawberry jam, which is not a flavor that you want with beer. Breakdown by countries, actual amount of time spent for his liver, and then his dead author choice was Betty Ford. Betty Ford, of course, the former First Lady. One memorable quote from her: "I liked alcohol, it made me feel warm." So here this current draft of the piece, and we'll see where this goes in sort of its next iteration, but all of the data collection and that associated work all being finished, sort of a fun project. That's it. Thanks very much.